My name is Margaret Lane. I am 83 years old, and the most humiliating moment of my recent life did not happen in a hospital or a courtroom or at a funeral. It happened at my own front door on a cold Christmas morning when my daughter hugged me and then pulled away. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me with that particular expression, the one children reserve for aging parents when they're trying to decide how honest to be. Then she touched my arm gently and said, "Mom, when did you last have a proper wash?" I told her I'd bathed that morning. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, that quiet, terrible doubt. And the worst part was not her doubt. The worst part was the shame that flooded through me like cold water. I was standing in my own doorway, in my home of 41 years, in the house where I'd raised my children, cooked 10,000 meals, buried a husband, and I felt small, exposed, like something had been stripped from me that I hadn't even known I was wearing. I had been bathing every single day, sometimes twice, hot water, strong soap, long scrubs. Everything I'd been taught, everything I'd always believed was right. I was wrong, profoundly, physically, dangerously wrong, and nobody had ever told me. Not my mother, not my doctors, not the magazines I'd read for 60 years. Just silence, and a lifetime of habits quietly destroying me from the outside in. What followed that Christmas changed how I understand my own body, my own age, my own mortality. I'm not sharing this because I've arrived at some comfortable wisdom. I'm sharing it because I sat with the shame alone for too long, and I suspect some of you are sitting with yours right now. The first discovery, my skin was crying and I thought it was just old age. It had started in October, weeks before Christmas, before Linda's visit, before any of it came into the light. I woke up one morning with my shins scratched raw. Not from anything external, from my own hands, working in the dark while I slept. Long, thin, red lines running up and down my legs, angry and stinging. I stared at them in the gray morning light and felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not pain, but grief. The quiet, low grief of watching your body become a stranger. I bought lotion, pink bottle, grandmother scent. I applied it every night like a ritual, like prayer. It didn't work. Within 2 weeks, white flakes had appeared on my arms, my back, the places I couldn't easily see. I'd find them on my dark sweaters, on my pillowcase, on the bathroom floor. Every morning felt like evidence of something going wrong that I couldn't name or stop. I did what seemed logical. I bathed more. Hotter water, longer sessions. 20 minutes, then 30. I scrubbed harder, determined to clean away whatever was happening to my skin. Everything got worse. For 3 months, I told myself it was just age, just the dry winter air, just the long, itemized list of things that stop functioning properly after 70. Knees, memory, eyesight, now skin. I didn't connect the daily bathing to any of it. The thought never even entered my mind. Why would it? I'd been bathing every day for 8 decades. It was as automatic as breathing, as innocent as breathing. But then, by accident, I stopped. I ran out of soap in early December. The sidewalks were icy. The car felt impossibly far, and I was too exhausted to go out. So I skipped a day, then another. On the third day, something shifted. The itching had softened, not gone, but dimmed, like a fire running low on fuel. By the end of that week, my skin felt different, calmer, less like a battleground. I sat with that realization for a long time, and it felt nothing like relief. It felt like discovering that the medicine you'd been faithfully taking for 30 years had been poison all along. My skin at 83 does not produce oil the way it did at 50 or even 70. The glands have slowed, some stopped entirely. Every hot bath was dissolving what little natural protection remained. Every scrub was opening microscopic tears my eyes couldn't detect, but my body felt in the darkness. I had been stripping myself raw with the sincere, devoted conviction that I was taking care of myself. There is a medical term for it, xerosis, chronic skin damage from overwashing. I looked it up afterward, sitting at the kitchen table with the laptop Eleanor's son had set up for me. I read the word 3 times. Then I closed the laptop and sat in silence for a while, because sometimes understanding something fully is its own kind of loss. The second discovery: there are things living on us that we keep killing. My neighbor's daughter brings her little girl Clara to me most afternoons while she runs errands. Clara is 8 years old, serious-faced, relentlessly curious, and completely without the social instinct that tells most people when to stop asking questions. One February afternoon, she was sitting at my kitchen table with a school worksheet about the human body. I was heating soup. She read quietly for a while, then looked up with the expression of someone who has just learned something important and cannot contain it. "Miss Margaret," she said, "did you know your skin cleans itself?" I told her I'd never heard that. She pointed to her worksheet. There was a section on the skin's microbiome, a community of microscopic organisms that live on the surface of our bodies and protect us from harm. Good bacteria, she explained, that eat dead skin cells and fight infection. Little guards doing invisible work. If you wash too much, she read slowly, you kill the helpers, and then the bad things can get in. She looked up at me. "Is that why you changed how you take baths?" I asked how she knew about that. She said her mother had mentioned it. Said I was being smart about my skin. I sat down across from her. The soup was bubbling behind me, and I didn't move. I thought about 60 years of washing away those invisible helpers, with absolute confidence that I was doing the right thing. I thought about my mother teaching me to scrub thoroughly, to wash daily, to never let a day pass without hot water and strong soap. She had been teaching me what her mother taught her, and somewhere in that long chain of women doing their best, something essential had been lost. Clara went back to her worksheet, and I sat there with the uncomfortable weight of understanding that the body knows things we've spent generations overriding, that there are systems in place, quiet, ancient, intricate, and our well-intentioned habits have been dismantling them year after year, bath after bath, without a single warning sign we knew how to read. The third discovery: what my doctor said made me feel stupid and relieved and angry all at once. I made a doctor's appointment, not because of an emergency, because for the first time in years, I had questions that mattered. Real ones, not the polite inquiries I usually offered at annual checkups. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Dr. Harmon and told her everything. The itching, the flaking, the accidental experiment of running out of soap. She nodded throughout, patient and unsurprised, with the expression of someone hearing a story they've heard many times before. For patients over 70, she said, we recommend bathing once or twice a week, 3 times at most, unless there's a specific medical reason for more. I repeated it back to her. Once or twice a week. The skin simply doesn't need daily washing at this stage of life, and more often than not, daily bathing causes the kind of damage you've been experiencing. I asked about odor, about Linda stiffening at the door, about the shame I'd been carrying since Christmas morning. Dr. Harmon leaned forward slightly. When the skin's natural barrier is damaged, as yours was, its defenses are compromised. Ironically, that can lead to odor issues that frequent bathing doesn't solve because the bathing itself is contributing to the problem. I drove home from that appointment in a particular kind of silence. Not peaceful, not the silence of resolution, the silence of a person recalculating everything they thought they understood. 60 years of certainty, 60 years of more is better, cleaner is healthier, daily is responsible. And the entire time, I had been working against my own body with the loyalty of a true believer. That night I called Linda. I told her what the doctor had said. I told her I had been bathing every single day, and it had been destroying my skin. There was a long silence on the line. Then she said quietly, "I didn't know that. I'm sorry, Mom." "You don't need to be sorry," I said. "Neither of us knew. Nobody told us." We talked for nearly half an hour, about skin, about aging, about all the things our mothers couldn't teach us because their mothers hadn't taught them. When we hung up, I sat in the kitchen with the lights off and let the dark settle around me. I thought about how many of us are walking through old age with inherited instructions that were written for younger bodies. How many of us are faithfully following rules that are quietly hurting us. How many of us will never think to question them because questioning the habits of a lifetime feels like questioning ourselves. The 4th discovery. The bathroom nearly killed me, and I wasn't even careless. Late February. A gray morning with weak light and frost still on the windows. I was taking my now twice-weekly bath, and I was feeling quietly proud of myself. I had the rubber mat with suction cups. The water was warm, not hot. I was moving carefully. I had learned things. I was applying them. I wasn't prepared. Getting in went smoothly. I washed my hair, once a week now, rinsed slowly. Then I put my hands on the sides of the tub and began to lift myself out. My arms shook. I've known for years that my arms have grown weaker, but it surprised me every time, that shaking, the body's reminder of what it used to be capable of. I pushed harder, got one leg over the edge, foot reaching for the mat, and then the other foot slipped. Just slightly, just a few inches. At 83, a few inches is enough. I grabbed for the towel bar. It held, barely, and I ended up half in the tub and half out, one leg trailing in cooling water, one foot on the mat, my heart slamming against my ribs hard enough to feel it in my jaw. I stayed there for what felt like a very long time, not moving, just breathing, just waiting for my body to remember that it was still alive. I pulled myself out slowly and sat on the closed toilet lid wrapped in a towel, dripping on the floor. A bruise was already forming on my hip where I'd hit the edge of the tub. My shoulder ached from gripping the towel bar. Nothing broken, this time. I thought about Harriet. Harriet lived 3 streets over, 79 years old, independent, sharp, proud in the particular way that older women are proud when they've survived a great deal and need no one's assistance, thank you very much. Last spring she fell getting out of her shower, broke her hip, 6 weeks in the hospital, 2 months in rehabilitation. Then her family moved her into a care facility because, they said, she couldn't be trusted to live alone anymore. I saw her once, after, at the pharmacy with her daughter. She was using a walker and she looked smaller, not just thinner, but dimensionally reduced, like something had been pressed out of her. She saw me across the aisle and said, very quietly, "Margaret, be careful with those bathroom floors." Nothing else, just that. Sitting on my toilet lid, wet and shaking and cold, I understood what she meant in a way I hadn't when she said it. One slip, one moment of bad luck or diminished strength or slightly less caution than usual. That's all that stands between a full life and everything that comes after. I looked up the statistics later. 1 in 4 adults over 65 falls every year. The bathroom is one of the most common locations. Wet surfaces, hard edges, the steam that quietly drops your blood pressure, the sheer muscular effort of lifting an aging body in and out of a tub. Falls are the leading cause of injury death for people my age. Not disease, not cancer, falls. And every bath I'd been taking, daily, with devotion, was a voluntary encounter with that risk. I had not known. I had not even thought to wonder. The 5th discovery, the bath was exhausting me, and I'd blamed everything else. After the slip, I paid closer attention to how I felt following each bath. What I noticed disturbed me more than the bruise on my hip. I was exhausted. Not pleasantly tired, not the gentle fatigue of someone who has done something physical and earned her rest. I was depleted, hollowed out. After each bath, I would sit on the edge of the bed in my robe and simply wait for the dizziness to pass, for my breath to normalize, for my legs to feel trustworthy enough to stand on. Sometimes 30 minutes passed before I could dress myself. I had assumed it was fear. Aftermath of the near fall. Anxiety settling into the body. At my next appointment, I described it to Dr. Harmon. She asked how long I was in the water, whether I felt dizzy standing up, whether I experienced shortness of breath. Warm water causes blood vessels to dilate, she explained. For an older cardiovascular system, that can cause a notable drop in blood pressure. The body then works harder to compensate. For some patients, bathing is genuinely taxing in the same way mild exercise is taxing. I stared at her. I've been exhausted after bathing for years. I thought it was just age. For some people it is age. For others, it's the bath itself. I drove home thinking about my garden. The tomatoes I hadn't planted last summer, the roses I hadn't pruned, the soil I hadn't turned. I'd told myself it was the heat, my knees, my motivation failing with the slow tide of age. But what if I had simply been spending everything I had on the basic act of getting clean and arriving at the rest of my day with nothing left? Clara came over that evening. She sat with her coloring book while I made tea, pressing hard with each crayon to make the colors as bright as possible. "Miss Margaret," she said without looking up, "why do you always look tired after your baths?" I asked how she knew. "Sometimes when I come over, you're lying on the couch. Your hair is still wet." I brought my tea to the table. "Because I'm old," I said, "and baths are harder than they used to be." She thought about this. "Maybe you should take less. Save your energy for the important things." I looked at this child pressing color into paper with complete seriousness, and something in my chest shifted. She had said in one sentence what had taken me 3 months of suffering, research, near disaster, and medical appointments to understand. Energy is not infinite. It never was, but youth disguises that fact generously. At 83, the account is leaner. Every withdrawal is visible. And I had been spending the first and best hours of my day on something that wasn't even helping me, while the garden sat unplanted and the porch sat empty, and the light came and went without me in it. The sixth discovery. Asking for help was the thing I'd been calling weakness. A medical supply catalog arrived in the mail that week. On the cover, an elderly woman sat in a shower chair, smiling with the placid contentment of someone who had made peace with something difficult. I almost threw it away. The shower chair felt like a symbol of everything I feared, the visible proof of decline, the equipment that announces to visitors and neighbors and your own reflection that you have crossed a line. My mother never had a shower chair. My grandmother never had one. I was not going to be the woman with one. I kept the catalog for 4 days before I opened it, and when I did, I thought about my husband, Edmund. Edmund died 11 years ago, slowly and then suddenly, the way it often goes. In his last months, he used a shower chair. He hadn't wanted to. He was a man who had built his own furniture, repaired his own roof, driven cross-country alone at 74. The chair felt to him like public admission that the body he'd inhabited for 8 decades was no longer cooperating. But once he started using it, he stopped being afraid of the bathroom. He took longer showers, washed more carefully, arrived at his days less exhausted and less tense. The last months were still hard. They were very hard. But they were not shadowed by the particular dread of falling alone in a wet room and not being found for hours. I had watched all of that, and still, somehow, 11 years later, I was sitting at my kitchen table refusing the same simple thing. I ordered the chair, and I called Sarah's husband, who is kind and practical and mercifully free of sentiment, to help me set it up. "My mother had one," he said, attaching the last bracket without ceremony. "Made a real difference." That night I took a bath sitting down. The water moved around my feet. I washed slowly, without gripping anything for survival, without the white-knuckled vigilance I'd developed every time I climbed into the tub. When I was finished, I stood up from the chair and stepped onto the mat, steady, unhurried, unafraid. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the old woman looking back. She was not defeated. She was not diminished. She had simply stopped doing things the hard way out of pride, and she was still standing. Edmund would have had something dry and loving to say about that. I stood there a moment longer, wishing I could tell him. The seventh discovery. Cleanliness is not what I was taught it was. The final understanding came quietly, without drama, on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I had begun what some medical resources call targeted cleaning, a warm washcloth at the sink rather than full immersion. Face, neck, underarms, the areas that genuinely require attention. Fresh clothes afterward. The lavender lotion Clara had given me for my birthday, applied slowly to arms and legs while the skin was still slightly damp. It took 5 minutes. I was not dizzy. I did not grip anything for balance. I did not spend the next hour recovering on the couch. And I felt clean. Genuinely, actually clean. Not stripped and stinging. Not exhausted. Not afraid. I also started using adult cleansing wipes for the days between baths. I'd resisted them for weeks for the same reason I'd resisted the chair. They felt like acknowledgement of something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. But they were gentle and effective, and they asked nothing from my body that my body wasn't prepared to give. I began keeping a small journal, just a few lines each evening. How I felt, what I'd done, how tired I was. The pattern emerged within 2 weeks, stark and undeniable. Bathing days, exhausted by noon, afternoon lost to recovery, evening spent horizontal. Non-bathing days, enough energy to walk down the block, to cook a real dinner, to sit on the porch and watch the light change over the rooftops. I had been robbing myself, daily, methodically, with total sincerity. And the things I'd stolen from myself, the garden, the porch, the hours of simply being alive in my own body, those were not small things. Those were the things that made 83 worth living. Linda came back in April, first visit since Christmas. She came through the door and hugged me, and this time she didn't stiffen, didn't pull back with that careful look. She held on for a moment. Then she stepped back and said, "You smell like lavender." "Clara gives me lotion," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "You look different, Mom. Not different bad. Different like lighter." I thought about what lighter meant. Not the shower chair, though that helped. Not the twice-weekly baths, though they helped too. Not the washcloth at the sink, or the adult wipes, or the handheld shower head that let me rinse my hair without lowering myself into peril. What felt lighter was the weight of doing everything the hard way for no reason except that it was familiar. The weight of inherited certainty. The weight of a lifetime of habits I'd never thought to question because questioning them felt like questioning myself. I'm still 83. My knees still ache. The mornings are still harder than they should be. I still find the occasional flake on a dark sweater. I still wake some nights and wonder, with the particular clarity of 3 a.m., how much time I have left and whether I'm spending it on the right things. But I'm spending more of it on the porch now, more of it in the garden, more of it at the kitchen table with a child who is 8 years old and completely unafraid of the truth. Clara asked me recently if I was afraid of dying. I told her that was a very large question for a Tuesday afternoon. She nodded seriously and waited. I thought about it honestly. I'm not afraid of dying the way I used to be afraid of it. I'm afraid of the bathroom floor, a little. I'm afraid of the fall that doesn't end the way the last one did. I'm afraid of becoming someone my children feel they have to manage rather than love. But I'm less afraid than I was last October, when I was waking up every morning with my legs scratched raw and no idea why. Less afraid than I was in February, hanging off the edge of the tub with my heart in my throat. Less afraid than I was at Christmas, standing in my own doorway feeling small and unwashed and ashamed. I know things now I didn't know then, not everything, not nearly enough, but enough to take better care of this body I'm still living in. This strange, aging, surprisingly resilient body that has carried me through 83 years and is still, against considerable odds, here. That has to count for something. I think it counts for quite a lot. If this story found you at the right moment, stay. Not because I have answers, but because sometimes it matters simply to know that someone else is sitting in the same questions, learning, slowly, what it means to take care of a life that has already come so far.